Just know, this video is a side project. My next big video is going to be a Vivid Pop deep dive, but I have a lot to talk about for that video, so I'm making this as both a follow-up for my last Jax related video, and also a filler so you guys can get content from me in the midst of another big upload video that'll probably be over 30 minutes. So, for starters, something I feel like I should have made clear in my original video is, from a writing perspective, Jax is probably one of the most well-written characters in the show. Gooseworks said herself she knew Jax was going to abstract from day one, and the fact that he abstracted reflects the show's message. You have to find meaning in stagnant life. Hence why he never had a redemption arc and why he never let his walls down. This all makes sense from a writing perspective. But one thing I want to mention now, Jax may be good from a writing perspective, but as we just went over, from an in-universe perspective, he's fucking insufferable. On the topic of things I want to correct in my original video, I mentioned how, in comparison to Jax's horrible way of coping, Ragatha went through worse. She has a nicer way of coping. Like I said, this video was made before the finale, so we didn't know at the time that Jax also has parental issues, but other than that, like I said, from a writing perspective, Ragatha and Jax are both showing how different people respond to the same trauma. Another thing I want to correct adds to these points. I mentioned how Jax was the least developed character in the whole show, and that he's too stale of a character, and I still sort of stand by this from an in-universe perspective, because as much as every character nearly got sidelined because of Jax, you can at least tell what Gooseworks wanted to do with their character arcs. But as you can probably tell where I'm going with this makes sense from a writing perspective. How many times can I say writing perspective in one video? Honestly, count how many times I say writing perspective in the comments. I want to know. Moving on, I mentioned how Ragatha and Angela's traumas were worse than what Jax went through. Like, I see where I was coming from with that. They've gone through some pretty depressing shit, but seeing what they were through was worse kind of rubs me the wrong way in retrospect. Comparing trauma, similar or not, isn't really a good thing to do because that feels like what someone else went through can't be validated because someone else had it worse. Like, yes, Jax's response to trauma makes sense. Like I said, how different people respond to trauma. But honestly, the way he became like a huge asshole was kind of stupid. Like, the way Jax responded being vulnerable around Rubo was such an overreaction. Like, you wonder why I hate Jax. And I can't even excuse this from a writing perspective, because, like, the only reason he actually turned back was because Kaufmo knocked on the door. Would Jax have still become an asshole if Kaufmo didn't knock on the door and acted all crazy? I don't know. But like I said, different responses to the same trauma. Though I still stand by how I said how Angel Dust has more development as a character, because no matter how I try to slice it, he's at least done more to improve himself than Jax has. A few other things I still stand by are how, 1, a sad backstory doesn't automatically excuse the way characters treat others. 2, nothing is objectively wrong with Jax being the main character, but if Gooseworks wanted him to be the main character early on, she should have done a way better job at setting that up. Because it should not take you until 7 episodes into a 9-episode long show to confirm he's the main character. Actually, I didn't include this in my script. Voice crack. The part that fascinates me about that, I'm including that in the video. The part that fascinates me about that is, it was around episode 7 came out that me and maybe a lot of other people started to notice that Jax felt like more of a main character than Pomni did. Then only after that would Gooseworks confirm Jax is also a main character. Does that not fascinate you in a way? Moving on. Even after the finale, Jax's whole backstory is kind of spoon-fed to us, with the only thing that's really left up for interpretation is the possibility of him being trans. Also, I still stand by the fact that Gooseworks should have tried to make us sympathize with him, because actually, on the topic of that, I mentioned how Jax was supposed to be an antagonist, but I don't actually remember her saying that. I don't even remember where she said that at all, so if anything, I probably just made that up on my part. My mistake. As an added bonus, when I mentioned how a main character has to be likable, someone named Jared Kiddo4245 commented, a main character being unlikable is okay as long as they do something interesting about it, which I think is a fair take, no problems there. And on a similar note, another comment by Lucarionite6538 said, I understand your perspective on Jax. I don't see him as a tragic character per se. Instead, I see him as a cautionary tale. That's why he is how he is. Pomni during her character development learned that no matter who the person is, no one is deserving of to be abstracted. That's why she gave him so many opportunities for redemption. That's just who she is. I think this is where people become subjective to how far a person can behave badly until they become irredeemable. There are people who have patience with difficulty that others just don't. Just watch Pomni's place with Zubul and imagine how these scenes would have played out. No, I'm not a Jax fan. I actually like her more. I love how you included that end bit, but aside from that, I actually like this take. That's what I said earlier about Jax from a writing perspective. Speaking of Pomni, I've seen multiple takes on Pomni, some saying she was a useless character, others saying how perfect her character development was. Now, whenever I get to making my view on Pomni, I'm going to try and look at both sides of this argument to see where I truly stand on this, because if you see my stance on murder drones, I don't want to come off as a hypocrite. Moving on, let's discuss my thoughts on the finale. Yes, it was basically Jax the movie. Was it really necessary for 90% of it to take place in his mind? Trigger warning, but abstraction is a metaphor for suicide. Hence why we never see an actual on-screen abstraction, because people usually commit such a thing in isolation. And when that happens in real life, how often do you get any actual closure on the real reason they did that to themselves without trying to think of, like, why? What happened? Oh, by the way, this is kind of a retcon, but in the pilot, when Ragza tried talking to abstracted Kaufmo, she gets all glitchy and can't do anything to stop it, yet later episodes retcon this, when Kira uses his hand to calm down the abstracted Queenie, and Pomni uses hug to calm down abstracted Jax, which somehow leads to her entering his mind. Now, I have mixed thoughts on the flashbacks. Obviously, they take up half the episode, like, come on. But aside from that, this is solely so Pomni can get closure on what Jax was so mysterious about. Like I said, when someone, does the thing, you never get proper closure on what happened. Now, maybe they can try including these flashbacks somewhere else in the story, so we, the audience, can understand what happened while the cast doesn't. But on the contrary, they probably shouldn't have included these flashbacks so the audience is left just as curious as the rest of the cast, which afterwards would lead to a lot of interesting theories interpreting his abstraction. Moving on, if I'm going to praise the finale in any way, I love Ribbit. Her dynamic with Capo and even Jax is so endearing to watch. This scene on screen right now actually got a laugh out of me. It was so refreshing to see Jax actually being nice for once. I'd honestly love to see more of this trio's dynamic. Unfortunately, though, that's the end of my praises, because Ribbit is basically just Pomni before Pomni. They serve the same purpose, and she, and by extension, basically half the cast, are just there solely for Jax's story. As for the ending, I'm sorry, but if I was trapped in metaphorical hell, only to learn I'm not real, it was just a copy of a real-life human's brain, and saw my real-life self living a life 1,000 times better than mine, not abstract at the blink of an eye. Sure, the cast had become accustomed to the circus, but imagine wanting to accomplish something big, only to end up in a situation where you can't accomplish said thing, only to learn there's a parallel universe version of you, where you don't end up in that horrible situation and accomplish what you always wanted to do. Would you let that slide easily? Personally, I wouldn't. Also, it's really fascinating to me that only after Jax abstracted did life in the circus improve for our main cast. By the way, I have little to no thoughts on Jax being a trans woman. It doesn't really matter whether or not Goose confirmed it, because not every person is going to read Goose's Tumblr post. And I don't blame people for saying if it's not confirmed in the show, it's not canon. Because if something is so important to the show, why not confirm it within the show? You should have to go somewhere other than the show itself to get an answer on something. Anyways, this is it for my ramble. Thank you for watching. Bill, roll the outro.
Remember, reality is an illusion, the universe is a hologram. Bye, gold, bye!